born again. Although some of the text of the Bible has been altered by sociopaths, there is an underlying message in the book which has not been destroyed. One of my favorites is a very spot-on metaphor, being born again, which signifies what we know of in psychology today. A mind is not born rational, but must learn rationality. A mind is not born knowing what life-supporting behavior is, but must learn it. The role of culture is critical for survival. Thus, we can say that we are physically born and we go into a learning process which, if successful, allows us to be born again, in the intelligible. The human mind, as the most powerful life support system possible, also takes the longest to mature and become functional in the human body. The purpose of education is to ensure that all children become born again. However, due to the availabilities of the modern-day teacher, the success rate is nearly nil. Our educational system's failure rate is due to evolution. Not many people are ever born again. However, this brings up a second topic, beta education and alpha education. Beta education attempts to encourage children to examine the world around them as a problem to solve, while the alpha approach is aimed to discourage active questioning and answering, imposing on them a curriculum aimed at making parrots. The shut up and learn to repeat education to the point of even drugging children is quite a fad in many educational circles. State-supported child abuse is called helping children, and state support also helps to explain why child suicides are on the rise. Every state in the world today is at war with being born again and thus are also at war with beta education. Do not ask questions, just shut up and repeat after us. Your state, your country, your religion, your parents. Bury the child, and raise a flag. An art form for killing the mind, while leaving the body active for use, is considered a winning proposition for all sociopaths. Despite this handicap in education, real life always imposes on people the need to learn and thus, at least for some point in their life, to ask and answer questions. This indicates a fractured psychology in much of a species and it does not, cannot, stop evolution. Ideally, alpha education is based on known answers to how to process information and survival techniques. However, due to the fact that it contains the bulk of lower intelligence, it is very susceptible to sociopathic infection, as we have seen throughout history. There is no cure for stupidity other than evolution. Stupidity is supposed to be conditional, not constitutional, or mandatory. One of the most popular techniques of a constitutionally enforced stupidity is to kill, imprison, or other methods of hampering intellectual influence. These techniques are employed across the board of every government today. Many, like myself, are forced to become self-educated. Children, naturally, are herd animals, and do not suffer individual divergence, especially when it comes to intelligence. Intelligence is a sociopath's most feared enemy. So, despite the tragic history of beta education, what becomes the first problem to solve for a mind that has been, as might be said, born again? The very same topic, education. Beta education leads to the discovery of the principles of rationality and survivability itself, and so, the first question which must be answered is how to impart that knowledge on children? Let us first examine our constraints. 1. All of information processing is accomplished by binary recursion. 2. Language is universal and intelligible, grammar is particular and perceptible. 3. The perceptible binary affords us exactly 4 methods of utilizing binary recursion for information processing: common grammar, arithmetic, algebra and geometry. 4. Geometry is a pure binary grammar and thus our metagrammar, which frees us from imposed social sanctions and sociopathy. 5. Psychology is commensurable with the principles of language, functionally resident in the mind as our grammar matrix. 6. We can only learn language by the application of grammar to the limits of our own particular level of intelligence. In short, we are limited by our evolution, our genetics. These are our working constraints, thus whether or not we become born again, able to process information in accordance with the truth of things, is always constrained by our own level of intelligence, which is determined by our genetic inheritance. Alpha education, or education based on the alpha animal approach, originally is based on fear, and thus fear is used to enforce it. Beta education is based on biological fact, the designed function of a human mind, and thus, learning to face and master fear is part of the curriculum. There are many things we are afraid of, and thus many opportunities to be taken advantage of by the sociopath. In the end, there is only one thing to fear, not accomplishing the recursion of life. This is a problem which drives evolution itself. Fear, truly is, a mind killer, second only to our own innate intelligence. Sociopaths use fear to kill functional culture. No one can possibly understand culture until they have learnt what its function in evolution actually is. An irrational culture is a culture which has been hijacked by sociopaths, evolutionary rejects. Sociopathy is actually the result of a dysfunctional mind. A mind is potentially the most powerful life support system possible. It is designed to manage human behavior through information processing, thus producing a species not dependent on the alpha animal, or again cited in biblical reference, a respecter of persons, but upon the intelligible results of information processing, which allows of the art of predictive behavior, which is simply called prophecy, judgment, rationality, etc. No matter how you stress that judgment is not a product of being a respecter of persons, the low intelligent person will always anthropomorphize God, the power of a mind, and thus they are susceptible to having their life hijacked by the sociopath. You cannot talk them out of it because they do not have the innate intelligence to process information correctly. They are born to be sycophants and the most persistent form of STD. And as there is one, and only one method of information processing, there is, for those born again, only one true form of government, which is called nomocracy. Law is the product of correct information processing, and this fact is behind the Bible itself. We can then denote the two types of education in different terminology. One is cultural education, the other has been called the phylactery education, an education provided by our own hand. We can, as intimated both in the Bible and by Plato, learn judgment using our own hand, line upon line, precept upon precept. One type of education is socially perceptible, the other is not. As written, we study in private, not in public. The phylactery education has sometimes been called sacred geometry, as it is a pure and perfect metagrammar, a purely perceptible application of the intelligible binary called language, or the language of the universe, often called the voice of God, the only power a mind has by which to do its own work. We are not, nor ever will be, a respecter of persons, great or small.
False words are not only evil in themselves, but they infect the mind with evil. Phaedo by Plato,